Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving right into a really high-stakes investor call with a major bank. For the first time in years, the shackles are off, and we're going to break down their blueprint for what comes next.
So you got to understand, for a long time, this bank had its hands tied. They were operating under something called an asset cap, which is basically a hard ceiling on how big they could get. Well, that cap is gone. And now the one big question on everyone's mind is, what's the plan? With the brakes off, where do they go from here?
Okay, so let's get into the first big puzzle that analysts were really digging into. It all revolves around this key idea called net interest income, or NII for short. You can just think of it as the bank's bread and butter. It's the profit they make from their core business of lending money.
All right, so here's where things get interesting. Analysts saw the bank projecting really good loan growth, and they were like, wait a minute, why isn't your profit forecast, your NII, going through the roof? And the answer? Well, it's basically a three-way tug of war. You've got falling interest rates pulling profits down, while at the same time, more loans and more deposits are trying to push everything up.
And what happens when you have these forces pulling in opposite directions? Well, you get a stalemate, at least for now. That headwind from falling interest rates is just powerful enough to cancel out all the good stuff coming from loan and deposit growth. So even though the bank is going to be busy, the actual profit line is expected to look pretty flat. The keywords there being for now. This leads us right to the next big dilemma, a classic one for any successful company. Now that they're free to grow and they're making all this money, what do they do with it? Do you pour it back into the business, make more loans, grow bigger? Or do you give it back to the people who own the company, the shareholders, by buying back stock?
And this is a really crucial point. The executive, Charlie, made it super clear. Their whole way of thinking has changed. See, in the past, when they were stuck under that cap, all they could really do with extra cash was buy back stock. But now, it's not an either-or question anymore. They're basically saying, hey, we're a cash machine now. We can do both. And that's a huge shift.
Okay, let's talk about the third big theme from the call. Efficiency. And you really have to look at this number to get it. $15 billion. That's how much in expenses they've already managed to slash to get lean and mean for this next chapter of growth. That is a massive, massive number.
And all that cost cutting? It's all pointing towards this one huge, ambitious goal. They're targeting a long-term profitability of 17 to 18%. Now, the technical term is return on tangible common equity, but all you really need to know is that it's a measure of how efficiently they're making money for their shareholders. And trust me, 17 to 18%, that is a really high bar to set.
So, naturally, you hear a big, juicy number like that, and what's the very next question that pops into your head? Yep, the analysts were all over it. That's a great goal, they said, but when? When are you actually going to get there?
But leadership basically said, hold on a second. They weren't willing to put a date on the calendar. And the reasoning was pretty straightforward. There were just too many wildcards out there. I mean, think about it. What's the credit environment going to look like? Where are interest rates headed? How volatile will the markets be? With all that uncertainty, making a specific promise would be, well, kind of foolish.
And speaking of those wildcards, analysts also wanted to poke around and see how the bank was thinking about potential threats from the outside. A big one that came up was all this talk in the political world about maybe capping credit card interest rates. You can see why that's a big deal. It could hit a major profit center for them, right where it hurts.
So how did they respond? Very carefully. They basically said, look, it's way too early to tell what the financial hit would actually be. But, and this is important, they didn't just dismiss it. They acknowledged that affordability is a real issue for people. And instead of fighting this whole conversation, they want to be part of it. They want a seat at the table to figure out a solution that makes sense for everyone.
So what about the other way to grow, buying up other companies? The answer here was a pretty firm no thanks. The executive team was crystal clear. We feel zero pressure to go shopping. Their thinking is that the opportunities they have to grow on their own are so good that for them to even look at buying another company, that deal would have to be absolutely amazing. The bar is incredibly high.
So let's wrap this all up. What's the big picture here? Well, the blueprint is out there for everyone to see. It's ambitious, for sure. They're trying to do it all at once, grow the business, stay super efficient, and keep shareholders happy with returns. The plan is set, the goals are lofty, which really only leaves us with the billion-dollar question. Now, can they actually execute?